I'm Trina from Cook Yourself Happier, which is all about mental health, what we can do to improve your diet. So if you're as flat as a pancake or as high as a souffle, we're going to show you how to make delicious things. I've got bipolar, which can make my life incredibly difficult sometimes. The thing that's kept me sane and happy basically is my cooking. I've cooked all over the world. I've been a private chef for the last 15 years, met some amazing, interesting people, and I'd like to share some of my stories and funny anecdotes with you and show you how you can make the dishes that I made for them. So today I'm going to make delectable herby risotto and roast monkfish. This is a dish that I first made for an Italian family in London. They wanted an authentic risotto like the granny used to make in Italy. What you want to do with risotto is you want to have a nice, shallow, almost sauté pan, which just gives you that surface area for the stock to evaporate off. So we're going to get started. You want a good sized leek. I'm going for a leek today because an onion is a little bit stronger and we want the subtlety of the leek. We also want the green colour just to give it that vibrance. And we're going to add the herbs in at the very end to keep the colour and to give you a fantastic flavour. So you want to split the leek, take the rooty bit off the bottom because obviously you don't want that in the final dish. You want a fine chop. You don't need to worry too much. It doesn't need to be a sort of fine dice, but you want sort of nice bits that you can give a bit of texture. We're going to sweat it off in a pan, so it doesn't need to be sort of too delicate. When I first made this dish in London for the family, they were having a big party, a big get-together with all their friends. They were having 50 people and I only had an aga to cook on. I had a huge stock pan and the lady of the house wanted to take the credit at the very end. So I spent all day saucing the best risotto, the arborio rice, the delicious monkfish from London. Just before the dinner party, this lady came in, took my apron off me, which I thought was a bit cheeky, put it on, and just as our guests were coming into the kitchen, gave it a couple of stirs and took all the credit. So you win some, you lose some. The secret with risotto is you want quite a shallow pan so the stock and the wine will evaporate. You don't want all that contained heat of a high pan. So once you've chopped your leek, sweat the leek off, not too harsh a heat. I've got a good knob of butter. Don't use oil, you want the flavour of the butter. And if the pan's too hot and you put the butter in, it's going to burn. So what you can do is add a little smidgen of olive oil, just to take that sort of nutty smokiness away from it. I've got my arborio rice here. This is the best rice you can use, and please don't wash it because you want all that gorgeous starchiness to keep the consistency. We're going for a creamy, rich consistency, and we want to cook it to the stage that it's al dente, which is Italian for with bite. We don't want to overcook it. There's nothing worse than a sort of stodgy pudding-like finished dish. As you can see, you don't need very many ingredients. You can keep your risotto. I've always got some risotto rice in the cupboard. It keeps for ages. And butter, you probably have for your toast and stuff anyway. The leek's going to keep for a good few days in the fridge. And the herbs, I love to have some potted herbs in the kitchen, as long as you remember to water them and don't keep them in a draft. Basil being one of the best herbs from the Mediterranean, likes a very dry heat. If you water them, they'll probably keep for a good couple of weeks. You can just snip off the tops with the scissors, got all those gorgeous flavours at your fingertips. I was cooking for an American family, the top of Scotland, a little place called Scowrie, and I was sweating off my leeks in the kitchen, and the grandfather and the father came in and they just looked at me as if I had invented this amazing new vegetable. They'd never seen a leek before, never tasted leek before. Just they could smell it coming from the kitchen, completely intrigued, thought it was fantastic. So I've got my knob of butter and I've got my pan, nice sort of gentle heat. We don't want to burn it, otherwise that's going to give you a terrible nutty flavour. We're going to then put in the chopped leeks and sweat them off in the butter. You want to give these a really good sweat off, get them all tossed into the butter before we add the rice, the wine and the hot stock. This reminds me of the time I made this dish once I nailed it for the Italian family. I was cooking on the Isle of Lewis, which is one of the Scottish Western Isles, and the nearest shop was about an hour away. So I had to improvise, I had to look into the garden, see what I could find, what vegetables I could use. The great thing about it was the fishmonger got everything straight from the harbour, so the monkfish was beautifully fresh, absolutely delicious. I was cooking for a group of young guys from London that were up there to have a wild time, and I had to come up with a different dinner each evening I think I was there for 2 weeks, so different lunch, different dinner to keep it interesting. So this risotto was a great hit. Some of the girlfriends were quite health conscious, didn't want a lot of fat, wanted something quite sort of Mediterranean and healthy, so the fish combination was fantastic. So we're just going to add the arborio rice. This is the main ingredient. The leeks have still got their colour, they're beginning to sort of reduce down a bit. Put the rice in, give it a really good stir because you want all the greens to be coated in butter, seal in that flavour. Now's the time that you would add your splash of wine if you're going to add that to the dish. It's entirely optional if you want to. And we're just going to keep this going like that. We've got it sort of a nice medium heat. Now I've got my stock bubbling away at the back and my trusty old ladle. So now that it's all coated in butter, we're just going to add very gradually about a ladle full of stock each time. Please keep it on a rolling boil because you want the heat to continue the cooking. You don't want to stop the process by having it any less than boiling. So as you hear that, this is the right moment to do it because you can hear the sizzling. So just keep adding it. What you want to do is give it a little stir, give it a wee stir in between each addition of the stock, and you want to allow the liquid to reduce before you add the next ladle full. You don't want your risotto to be too wet, so you can gauge how much stock you need to use. And if it's beginning to reduce and you think you're going to run out of stock, just keep the kettle boiling away, add some more boiling water. I've put 2 organic stock cubes in there, which should be enough for sort of 2 pints of boiling water. The stock's now nicely reduced, so we're just going to add another ladle in. This whole process will take about 20 minutes to get to the sort of al dente stage that we're looking for, still with that little bit of bite. So it's bubbling away nicely. And what you can do is you can leave this on a reasonably gentle heat and just keep your eye on it. You don't need to stand over it. This is a non-stick pan, which makes all the difference, so hopefully it was not going to catch. You can spend up to £50 on an aged piece of Parmesan. You don't need to go that sort of high up the level. You can get supermarket Parmesan. You're looking for something that's been matured for a good few months. You don't want sort of the plasticky flavour. Go to your cheese counter, ask the person behind the cheese counter for their advice. We're going to go for the medium-sized grate. And you want to be incredibly generous. You don't want to stint when it comes to the Parmesan because that's where all the gorgeous cheesy flavour's coming from. I've taken the rind off because this is the top tip that my Italian family gave me. This has got loads of flavour on. Most people cut it off and discard it and throw it in the bin, or else you might have a scabby bit that you've had in the fridge from another pasta dish or something else that you've made. This is amazing. Put it in with the rice. Once the rice is sort of beginning to cook, stir it. All that gorgeous flavour is going to come away from the rind. The only thing is you need to remember to discard it before you serve it because you don't want the sort of heel end. You don't want to be giving that to your guests, to your family and friends, otherwise you're going to be in trouble. So we've got the Parmesan cheese grated off, and I've got my chives here. I'm going for fresh chives, fresh parsley and basil. Those are my top 3 herbs. You basically want to sort of quite finely chop them because you don't want sort of bits that look like stringy grass in your risotto. That's never a good look. So just give those a good dice. If you don't feel confident with a very, very sharp knife, you can use scissors. And what I would say is get a little ramekin or a small bowl and just snip away at the chives into the bowl. It makes it dead easy. You can do this in advance and then you're just adding it in at the very last minute. We've got flat leaf parsley. I much prefer flat leaf parsley to the sort of tightly bunched thing. I think it's got a better flavour and a better texture. The stalks are also fantastic in your stock. So one day we'll make vegetable stock together and I'll show you how to do that from scratch. There's loads of flavour in the stock. When it comes to something sort of quite delicate like the risotto, you just want to take the top bits off, leave the stalks for something else, and you just want the light sort of leaves in there. So we're going to go for the basil plant now. You can find it in your supermarket pre-cut and in a bag. If you can, get the fresh stuff in a pot, makes all the difference. So Get your scissors, or the secret with basil actually is not to chop it, and don't keep it in the fridge, because if you keep it in the fridge, it's going to go black and lose all its flavour and its fantastic colour. So just pick away, just pick it delicately, and then gently tear it in like this. You just want to sort of keep that flavour, just like you're sort of in the garden with a lettuce leaf. And then we're going to put all our gorgeous herbs aside that we're going to add into the risotto at the very last minute. Just stir those through. You want to add the grated parmesan at the last minute as well, maybe with a little smidgen of butter, but again, it's entirely up to you, whatever you feel like doing. So this is our monkfish tail. Monkfish used to be called the poor man's lobster because of its meaty texture. They would use it for scampi and things like that. It's very, very fashionable now, but the price has gone up. So this piece of monkfish that I got from a local fishmonger, £4. And we're going to fillet it off at the end. Keep the bone, this has got the tailbone running down the centre of it. That keeps the flavour when you're cooking it, keeps it nice and juicy and tasty, and it also keeps the shape so it doesn't start falling to bits. Now, when you buy it, it has a grey, slimy membrane over the top. What you can do is ask your fishmonger to take this off with a very, very sharp knife, or you can do it like I'm about to show you how to do it now. Now, you can either do it with your hands or scissors, or if you feel confident, get a very sharp knife. It's not tricky, it's not difficult at all. You've just got to be quite careful to take it all off, because otherwise, when you're cooking the fish is going to contract, it's going to shrivel up and have a sort of terrible grey sheen over the top of it. So quite lucky with this one, considering the size of the tail. There's not too much of a membrane on it. Please be careful, you don't want to sort of take any of the delicious flesh off, because monkfish is expensive and we don't want to lose any of that delicious white meat. So just go over it with your hands. Here's another little bit that we don't want to miss. Sometimes there are sort of little spiky bits running up the middle of the bone, so just be careful that you don't nick your fingers. But as I said, if you don't want to do this at home, you think, oh, it's a bit smelly and disgusting, your fishmonger will do it very, very quickly for you with a filleting knife. So there we go. Now, the secret with meat and fish is not to put the oil in the frying pan, because it's going to burn and spit and potentially burn the fish. We just want to seal in the flavour, and so we can just rub some olive oil, season it very, very well. That's the next stage. Now, a monkfish tail like this will take about 6 to 8 minutes to cook, but there's nothing worse than overcooked fish. So you want to get it to the stage where it's just done, and like meat, we're going to rest it for about 5 minutes just to let all those juices relax. So the secret is just to slightly undercook it, and then the residual heat when we rest it will just finish the monkfish off, and it'll be absolutely delicious. This reminds me of the time that I was cooking up north for Christmas for a party of, I think it was about 30, and I had all this delicious fish that I was going to serve for Christmas Eve dinner. I had it laid out in the larder because it was nice and cold before I started cooking it. The Irish wolfhound got into the larder, polished off every morsel, and I had to then rustle up something completely from scratch. Now we're going to get the monkfish on the go. So we're going to get the sauté pan. Just move this out the way because you want the extra space. We've got this at a nice high heat because we're wanting to seal in all the flavour. We want to oil the fish and not the pan. So just get a smidgen of olive oil, pop some on the top side of the fish, not too much. Just give it a good rub in. We're just going to season up the monkfish. We've got the cracked black pepper. Just give it a good bit of that. And then we've got the sea salt. The secret's always in the seasoning, and if you're doing your preparation beforehand, you don't want to put the salt on before you cook the fish because it's going to draw out all the moisture, make it very watery. So we're going to get the monkfish in this red hot pan. You can see it's smoking slightly, and we're doing this to seal in all the flavour. So we're just going to season a bit more on this side, a bit more salt, smidge more black pepper. You can see the bone, fish is just coming off the bone a bit, but it's going to keep all that delicious flavour in and keep the moisture. So the temptation is to poke around and move it around, just restrain yourself, and by this time you should be able to flip it over. We've got a nice bit of colour on there. Just going to turn it down a bit, just so it's not too fierce. Now it's at this point that you can add a bit of butter if you want. It's entirely up to you. Just a smidge of butter. So the risotto rice is almost there. We're getting to the end. So we're just going to flip the fish over again. Make sure we seal it on all sides so the flavour's in there. This whole process is going to take between 6 and 8 minutes. And as you can see, you've got some gorgeous colour on there, just coming along nicely. So we've finished the risotto now. Going to just pop the risotto in the middle of your serving bowl. I think risotto always looks much better in a bowl. And then I've had my fish resting for about 4 minutes, just to let it settle, let all the juices calm down. This is a generous helping for one, but there's been many a time that I've been cooking in the middle of nowhere and I've gone to serve the dish round the table and I've got to the second person and they've literally taken 3/4 of what was meant for a dinner party of 12. So as you can imagine, it was back to the drawing board. I had to rush back into the kitchen and try to rustle up some more. This is the monkfish. Just going to slice one of the fillets off and sit it on top of the risotto. You want your knife just to run down the bone so you're not losing any of the meat. And that's beautifully done. That's just cooked, so it's got all the flavour in the juice. I'm just going to carve it into little medallions and sit it on top of the risotto. And then just finish it off with a bit of basil that we took from our plant. And that's our finished dish. Delectable herby risotto with roast monkfish. Happy cooking.